Jillian Michaels is not just an emotional nightmare, but is also somebody who makes money off of the suffering and the abuse of these contestants. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name is Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today, we are talking about a Netflix docuseries that is called Fit for TV, The Reality of the Biggest Loser. Because I saw this on my Netflix like coming up thing and was like, oh, I got to sit down and I got to watch that. Because in case you're not familiar, right, I grew up in the 90s and the early aughts. The fascination with The Biggest Loser was at an all-time high. I, like many others, was subjected to the 100-calorie packs, the snack packs that were like everywhere during that era. So it was like prime, we're obsessed with weight loss era. And I was also personally victimized by the obsession of this. And so I expected it to be a pretty scathing take about how awful the show was, because in past years, there have been articles that have come out and like, you know, little think pieces about the way that the show detrimentally impacted the health of its contestants and just generally like what a fucked up enterprise this whole thing was. So I figured that it would be like sort of a scathing take about the show. Wrong. It turned out to be actually not, I don't know why I'm surprised because it's Netflix. It turned out to be not as progressive as I was hoping, which means that there's some real rancid ass fucking takes in this little limited docuseries that we really need to talk about. So let's do that. First and foremost, if you're not familiar, The Biggest Loser was a TV show that started in the early aughts, basically centered around a reality TV competition for fat folks to lose as much weight as humanly possible in a very short amount of time, which sounds fucking terrible. That's because it was. They basically hired celebrity fitness coaches to come in and verbally and physically and emotionally, spiritually probably too, berate and abuse these fat people for the purpose of losing weight. They were working out like 6 to 8 hours a day. They were in a severe calorie deficit. One of the contestants talks about only eating like 800, maybe less than 800 calories a day, while also working out like 6, 8, 10 hours a day for months, which is fucking awful for your body, by the way. But especially as a fat person, to be putting that much weight on your joints and your like stress on your body with no warning, no ramp up, fucking terrible, terrible decisions. So the show was centered around this, and it was also very much like the inspiration porn of it all, right? And this docuseries that Netflix recently made goes through the stories of a couple of the contestants and talks about, and to like the celebrity coaches, well, not Jillian Michaels, because she declined to be interviewed, which no one is surprised about that. But they talked to the contestants and a couple of the producers and just people involved with the show to sort of like, you know, retrospectively look back at the legacy of the show, whatever. The thing, first of all, that I want to point out is that almost everybody, including some of the contestants, seem to do this thing where they're all pointing the finger at somebody else to, you know, place blame about the way that contestants were abused and mistreated on the show. But nobody seems to acknowledge or take any accountability for the way that we treated people, especially the fucking producers and also Bob Harper. Fuck that guy. He sucks. Watch me be saying his name wrong. I'm pretty sure his name's Bob Harper. The male fitness coach for The Biggest Loser says outright, I stand behind everything that I did on the show.
I will stand behind everything that I've ever done on that show.
Shut the up!
I am proud of what I've done.
Just stop talking and do it!
Which apparently includes being verbally and emotionally abusive to one of the only women of color on the show and turning her into a stereotype, basically trying to force her into the angry black woman stereotype. So I guess he stands behind that behavior also, which I find odd and disgusting, but whatever. I guess that's his legacy that he's happy with. So this attitude is like very present in all of the people on the show, which I think is just kind of emblematic for the way that this enterprise speaks and talks about its contestants and also just like society at large, which is that if you're fat, we don't care about you, and we're perfectly happy to abuse you and treat you poorly if it means that I can enrich myself or somehow benefit myself in some way. Before we get more into that, I want to say thank you to this week's sponsor, which is Delete Me. Y'all know that we love Delete Me around here. They are a hands-free subscription service that helps you remove your personal information from hundreds of data brokers online. And in case you don't know, data brokers are these corporations that take your personal identifiable information, which is stuff like your phone number, your address. They package it all up into these little profiles and then they sell them, which is concerning, obviously. Delete Me actually conducted some research and found that the amount of personal info available about us online tripled between 2019 and 2023, which, as a person who is fanatical about my own privacy, I was pretty grieved about that information, especially because this information can be available for free sometimes or as little as $5 per profile. At this point, it's really not a question of if, but rather when and how your information gets put out there. And we can't really control that, but Delete Me really puts me at ease because they help to remove this data and they also make it harder for people to access it. Delete Me helps by removing your information from hundreds of data brokers, and they also continually monitor sites all year long to make sure that you stay removed. That can help to protect you from things like identity theft and even stalking. I'm going to show y'all my dashboard right now because every month when I log in, I think I'm not going to be shocked by what I see, and then I am. Delete Me removed all of this new stuff that they found, and they also re-removed some of these other things that had popped up again. Thankfully, Delete Me has a special code for all of my followers that you can use to get 20% off of your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/Mickey Atkins and use promo code Mickey Atkins at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/Mickey Atkins with promo code Mickey Atkins. Thank you very much to Delete Me for sponsoring this week's video. Let's go ahead and hop back in. I actually want to play you guys a clip. Joelle is her name. She was a contestant on one of the early seasons of the show. And I want to play you a clip from one of her interviews because it's very poignant. I'll play it for you now.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Oh, sister.
We were up there, trembling, falling, and I felt like, were they intentionally trying to do that? And I now understand that's part of the good for TV. People like making fun of fat people. It's just what they do. That was the first time I ever felt that tinge of what loser meant. Are you trying to make me look like a loser?
Obviously, I think the people of color, the women of color specifically on the show, probably had the worst time of all the contestants, but I do think that her interview is sort of a greater representation of the way that contestants were treated on this show, which is that they were essentially pawns being used for the entertainment of America, but specifically thin people and also fat people who hated themselves and wanted to be thin people, right? The way that Joelle sums this all up is kind of perfect because, again, if you weren't around at the time, the show relied pretty heavily on this sort of good guy personality, in the sense that it was like, we're just like trying to help these people, right? The rhetoric that gets used in this docuseries especially is like, that was my last chance to save my life. So for Joelle to talk about having this realization that these people were not on her side, they were not in her corner, and they like literally set her up to fail for the purpose of humiliating her. But generally, this is what the show did, right? Which was use fat people for the entertainment and the inspiration of thin people, but also other fat people who were still in a place where they couldn't accept themselves, right? At one point in the show, actually, one of the things they talk about is that, you know, we've all been trained to not like our bodies and to feel very uncomfortable with ourselves, except that media, like The Biggest Loser, was one of the ways that we were training people actively to hate themselves and to feel so uncomfortable with themselves that they would do things like sign up for these shows where you're pitted against your fellow contestants to mutilate and harm yourself for the purpose of losing weight to try to win money and win favor and win approval from thin people. And that's another thing that is kind of a through line through the show, actually, which is that even at the very end, there is almost no discussion of acceptance of ourselves and like fat bodies just existing the way that they are. I think Danny Cahill is probably the only person who got close to this. At the end of the series, they ask him, you know, what's next for you? I'll show you what he says.
So what's next for me? I mean, I have a great life, a great wife, a great job, great kids, great family. I think this is next for me, putting myself first again, and my wife too. We both need to make a change. I think that one of the things that we figured out is that we aren't getting any younger. We need to do it for the right reason, not for a show, not for a prize, but for our health.
This was the only moment in the show that we get even anywhere close to accepting that, like, I'm just fat and that's fine, right? Except that even then he talks about him and his wife sort of doing it for the right reasons, right? The subtext obviously being that like they're going to try to lose weight for the right reasons rather than for money or competition or whatever. But except that doesn't have to be the case, right? Thank God Aubrey Gordon was interviewed for parts of this show because I think she was the only like refreshing and nice thing about this show, which I would bet big money that there were more progressive and useful takes that woman had that got cut out of the show because you know, it doesn't really fit the rhetoric of like, fat people still need to lose weight though. And it's just disappointing to see that we made this whole series talking about how The Biggest Loser actually fucking was awful and very abusive. Still don't touch on the fact that fat people can just exist as fat people while also being healthy and prioritizing their health. Okay, so let's double back really quick. First of all, I know that there's going to be people in my comment section on this video who are not familiar with my channel or my content. First of all, hi, thanks for coming. But also, this is a fat positive space where we embrace the perspective and the truth that fat people can just exist the way that they are, and that you can be a fat person and a healthy person at the same time, because health is not just simply made up of our relation to gravity in our current circumstances, right? Health encompasses a lot of things. And so you can be a healthy person who is also fat and also deserving of acceptance and love and to, like, I don't know, exist just the way that you are. And so if you don't like that, piss off. I don't care. But the thing that I wanted to talk about is that the show, despite its proclaimed attempt to save people's lives and it's their last chance to change their lives and whatever in the pursuit of like medical healthiness, right? Actively puts these people in fucking medical danger. This is one of the things that I was actually happy that they talked about, which is that the doctor on the show, even for, you know, he sucks also. This man was actively fighting with the producers and the fitness coaches all the time, saying things like, even if your trainers, your coaches tell you that you need to be eating 800 calories a day, like, that's not okay. You need to be eating at least XYZ amount of calories. And they would disregard his advice, right? Jillian Michaels gave contestants caffeine pills, even though that was discouraged by the doctor and like the show generally. This seems to be another area, though, where we kind of like scratched the surface of what was actually going on, but refused to admit any real sort of scathing takes about the show generally, probably for legal and liability reasons. But it seems like this was just sort of the tip of the iceberg as far as the medical abuse that these people endured. And I want to talk about this a little bit because we sort of started to touch on this a little bit, right? Aubrey Gordon especially, and this is why I said I'm pretty sure they cut some of her takes out of the show, because if you've never listened to the Maintenance Phase podcast, it's great. Aubrey generally is just great. But we sort of touched on the way that this is abusive and shitty, but we don't really address the underlying issue here, which is that we are willing to make an example out of fat people and medically, physically abuse them for the purpose of like supposedly making them more medically healthy, when actually what we're doing is damaging their health and putting them in danger. This is the thing, right? People say this all the time when they're leveraging vitriol towards fat people on the internet that, well, you're just not healthy. We just want you to be healthy. We just care so much about your health. No, you don't. No, you don't, though, because the show as an enterprise, even for its inspiration porn kind of posture, openly on camera medically endangered these people, and no one seemed to care or notice. This is why I said it's also like very early aughts behavior, right? Because we were very happy at the time to openly abuse and be hateful towards fat people because it was just, you know, that's just the way that it is. And again, I think recently we've gotten like maybe a little bit better about it, but not that much better, because this is still kind of the way that we treat people, right? If you're fat, you're deserving of abuse, and we are willing to endanger your health because we want you to one day be healthy. That doesn't make any sense. This is the thing that I think we're just sort of refusing to say the quiet part out loud, which is it's not about your health. It's never about fat people's health. It's about the fact that being fat is a lot of people's worst nightmare. And so in projecting their own fear and self-loathing and self-hatred, they become abusive, vitriolic, disgusting people and spew all of this hate at fat people and justify their hatred under the guise of just wanting fat people to be healthy or to live long lives or whatever, right? There was a study that they referenced in the docuseries about how the metabolic rate of some of the contestants seemed to have slowed way down after the show completed, or after their run on the show was completed. They did address that it's an imperfect study in the sense that you don't have a control group and that it's not a particularly large sample size, right? So it's not gold standard research by any means. However, there were pretty compelling results saying or revealing that contestants' metabolic rate decreased a lot after they had been on the show. So much so that the findings indicated that these contestants would have to permanently be in a calorie deficit to like the hundreds, like 800 calories, I think is what they said, in order to continue to maintain the body weight that they had landed at after their stint on the show, which is fucking cuckoo bananas. Danny Cahill is one of the people who won his season of The Biggest Loser, and he talked about how being 800 calories in the hole from the moment that you wake up and having to just like skip a meal, I guess, or exercise 8 hours a day for the rest of your life is just not living. And this is kind of at the heart of why shows like The Biggest Loser, our cultural fascination with weight loss is a problem, because for as much as people posture and pretend, even though they're lying, that they want fat people to be healthy, what we're not acknowledging is that sometimes we pretend that we want fat people to be healthy so much that we're content for them to not live their lives, right? This is what sucks. This is what's at the core of why this fucking sucks so bad, because it doesn't really matter. Like if you're healthy and you're living a long life, but you're not really getting to live and you're not experiencing joy and you can't do the thing, you have birthday dinners where you get to go on vacation and not be in a calorie deficit, where you're not constantly stressed, anxious, depressed about your calorie deficit and your diet and your exercise routine and your pant size, then it doesn't really matter. What is the point in living a long life if your life is riddled with anxiety and depression and self-loathing and sadness and constant neuroses about your food and your body and your diet? What's the point? What's the point in that? At one point, I think Bob Harper says that if you've struggled with your weight at any point in your life, it's just going to be the monkey that's on your back forever. This is the thing. We get like so close to the point in addressing that sometimes fat people are just fat because of circumstances that they can't control, right? Aubrey talks about this in one of her interview moments also. Actually, I'll try to play that for you.
The idea is that fat people cannot be trusted around food. It's designed to make you draw conclusions about the contestant's character based on what you see them eat on camera in a 5-minute period.
This is at the heart of why this messaging sucks, because the perspective being that fat people are only fat because they just can't be trusted around food is inherently flawed, right? Bob Harper gets so close to the point here in saying like, well, you're just going to struggle with it forever. So what you're saying is that it's not about food. What you're saying is that it's not about an inherent lack of willpower or a lack of morality. It's about the fact that sometimes your body does things that are outside of your control. And so you can fight this lifelong struggle to force your body through calorie deficit, through suppression, through constant exercise to be at a certain size that your body is just not able to consistently maintain. Or you can acknowledge that your genetics, your gut microbiome, your environmental circumstances, your socioeconomic circumstances might mean that you're not able to maintain the body size that you think or that society thinks that you ought to have. And instead, we can let go of our fixation with what our body ought to look like and embrace and validate that our body's going to look the way that our body is meant to look, or that it will look given our current circumstances and our medical predisposition. And that in doing that, it creates enough space for us to, first of all, be a fucking happy and less riddled with anxiety person, which is good for your health, by the way. But also that we can prioritize some of our health promoting behaviors, things like cardiovascular exercise, things like eating a nutritionally dense diet, things like avoiding high risk behaviors, things like avoiding behaviors that put us at a much higher risk for eating disorders, for mental illnesses rather, and avoiding all of these other behaviors and circumstances that are associated with negative health outcomes across the board. This is what I'm saying. We get so close to the point and we still refuse to acknowledge it, and it is so frustrating that even after all this time in this docuseries that is supposed to be exposing the dark underbelly of The Biggest Loser and whatever, we don't really do that. We don't really seem to do that, and we also seem to have not really done any meaningful reflection about the way that The Biggest Loser fucking sucked. For what it's worth, I guess the show actually was still filming up until like kind of recently. I think they had a season in like 2016 or something, which granted is almost 10 years ago, but still, I mean, I thought we like left The Biggest Loser in like, 2009, but I guess we did not. So it's not surprising necessarily, but still disappointing. And to that end, the coaches and the producers talking about how they stand behind their behavior on the show because they changed people's lives and all of this stuff. Danny Cahill, obviously he was interviewed a lot in this little docuseries, so there's a lot that he had to say that made it into the show. He talks about how he gained all the weight back that he had lost during his season of The Biggest Loser, and that he gained that weight back without even really trying. It's not he developed binge eating disorder and was, out of control. He gained this weight back by just existing in his life. And when he reached out to the producers to say like, oh my God, I need help. Please, can we explore the possibility of, a gym membership or some kind of, return to the show or like, some kind of support after his season had concluded. And he asked on behalf of all the contestants, right? He essentially proposed this idea as a thing that The Biggest Loser could do for past contestants in good faith. The producers essentially told him to go fuck himself. They didn't respond. They didn't say anything. And mind you, The Biggest Loser was making like $100 million a year at this time. The show was wildly successful, especially because they were licensing anything that they could put their fuck-ass logo on. But the producers, when asked about it on camera, said, as much as we'd love to do that, we just don't have the budget for it. What? This is, again, so transparently not at all about the health or well-being of the contestants. They don't fucking care. They don't care. They never cared. They continue to not care. And this is why the sort of inspiration porn of it all really pushes my fucking buttons, because not only is this a show that's predicated upon the abuse and the judgment of fat people, but it is also so transparently not at all done in good faith. I still think it would suck. I still think it sucks if it was judging and shaming and participating in training people to dislike themselves and their bodies, but done out of like a genuine goodwill and desire to help people. But it's not even that. It's not even that. We are openly abusing, shaming, judging the contestants, and then giving the message to all of the people who watch the show or are exposed to the show that fatness is inherently immoral, bad, disgusting, and needs to be changed at all costs, including medically damaging your body and emotionally damaging your mind for all perpetuity. But also, we don't really give a fuck about you, though. We don't care to help you or to help you maintain any of the results that you achieved on the show. We just don't care. We don't care about any of the contestants, and we never will. But again, it's the rhetoric of we stand behind everything that we've done and it's a good show and we're helping people change their lives. Are you? One of the contestants actually from season 2, her name is Monica. She talks about how being on The Biggest Loser was like hands down one of the worst decisions that she ever made. Not just for the obvious reasons, right? Which is that it was medically harmful to her and that it was like fucking emotionally traumatizing. But also that she, because of the notoriety around all of this, was treated poorly. Not the least of which was at her job. She talks about how she was a cop, but that she was singled out for not just being a woman, but also because of her weight, that she was forced to weigh in front of all of her colleagues to see if she could gain back any of the weight that she had lost on The Biggest Loser, right? The notoriety and the spectacle of it all was not just while these people were on the show, it also negatively impacted their lives afterwards, and for some people for years and years. The legacy of this whole show is not one of goodwill and inspiration and life-changing. It's like a scarlet letter that these people have to wear because the show made a fucking joke. It made a freak show out of perfectly normal people who just so happen to be fat. And especially they did the thing that reality TV does, which is that they don't inform contestants of the risks and the possible negative outcomes. It sort of forces them into this show by heavily pressuring them to sign this contract that they don't really know what's in it, right? One of the other contestants talks about how they're in this hotel room alone. And mind you, at the time, cell phones weren't really a thing that we could use to access the internet, especially. And that she asked for a lawyer before she signed her contract. And they said, okay, listen, there are 100 people lined up behind you that will take your spot on the show. So if you really are going to put your foot down that you want a lawyer, sure, but you should think very carefully about making that request because we don't need you, right? You need us. This is why when we talk about like Love is Blind and all these other reality TV shows, a lot of the, is like, well, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they're getting into. Do they though? Do they? Because this is the thing that reality TV does to people, which is heavily pressure them to make these decisions that they're not really aware of the long-term consequences of. Speaking of which, let's talk about the fact that this show used their coaches, they positioned their coaches, their trainers, whatever, as pseudo-therapists, which this shit pushes my fucking buttons. I think no one should be surprised, especially if you've been here for any length of time, that I have no patience whatsoever for the sort of fake therapist thing that reality TV does. But this is like especially heinous because the show shows this little docuseries, it shows some clips of the way that the trainers interacted with the contestants. I'll try to give you some clips now because it's awful. Sorry if you heard a yelping noise just then. My dog was taking a little nap. She was dreaming.
Take your sorry ass out of my gym.
I'm gonna break your legs and beat you with them. Now get up.
Every time you want to quit, you think about your father who's about to drop dead on the treadmill. Go. Go! Go, Tora! Go! Go, go, go! I don't care if your neck breaks in half.
I'm not
Well, then
trying to
do it,
quit.
Joelle! Wake up. Wake up. It only gets worse. It gets better. No, it gets worse. Don't roll your eyes at me, girl. I will ruin your life in this place. Are you going to pass out? Yes or no?
I think so.
No, not I think so. Stand up.
So these same people then are for some reason being positioned and the contestants are being pressured by producers to treat their trainers like they're a kind of therapist, right? There's these moments that are supposed to be really sweet and touching, especially Jillian Michaels seems to be really guilty of this. They talk about this in the series, that her physical and verbal abuse, emotional abuse of the contestants is often punctuated by this little inspirational speech that I wouldn't treat you this way unless I really believed in you, right? I am doing this because I know that you have it in you. And so that's why I'm talking to you this way, which is literally the way that abusers talk to people. That's literally, in case you didn't know, that's such a red flag. That's the way, oh my gosh, look, I bought one. That's such a fucking red flag. This is the way that abusers talk to people when they tell you, well, it's the, I hurt you because I love you thing. Bad. This is so dangerous and textbook abuser shit. And the fact that this show was like, do that. Go spill your guts about all of your difficult life circumstances and all the traumatizing things that might have led you up to this point with the person who's going to show up in 10 minutes and tell you that I'm going to ruin your life if you roll your eyes at me. And that doesn't even touch on the fact that these people have absolutely bupkis for training about how to be, honestly, even just like validating, even just like a shoulder to cry on. These people have absolutely no credential and no reason to be positioning themselves or to have been positioned as a safe place for these people to go air out their stuff with, right? I know, obviously, when you're talking with your friends, this is the thing that therapists get all the time. Like, I don't need therapy. I have my friends. Those are different. Those are not the same. It's not to say that our friends and family and our support system aren't important, because they are, right? Especially good therapists, in my opinion, will continue to encourage clients to foster those relationships, because it's critical for our success and our safety that we have those relationships. But therapy is a wholly different animal, completely different, because what's happening there is you have an objective outside perspective about the things that are going on in your life, and they're able to reflect back to you the patterns, the tendencies, the problems, the inconsistencies, the dangers that are present in your life and your behavior and the behavior of others, and sort of posit, why is that? What's going on there, right? Is there trauma? Is there some childhood stuff? Do we have attachment things? Do we have a mental illness or a disorder or a diagnosis or a condition that might be contributing to this pattern or this issue that is causing you distress, essentially, right? The reason that this is successful is because therapists are objective people who don't have any skin in the game in your life, right? We don't have any investment in trying to force you to think one thing versus the other. We are simply an objective perspective that allows you the space to deepen your understanding of what's going on in your life, and then help you find the empowerment and the courage to make decisions guided by your best interest and guided by your own thoughts and feelings and values and beliefs, right? I think it's safe to say that Jillian Michaels is not the person that anybody should be relying on for just like garden variety emotional support, but especially an objective perspective about their troubles, their trials, their tribulations, and especially because Jillian Michaels is not just an emotional nightmare, but is also somebody who makes money off of the suffering and the abuse of these contestants, right? There actually was somebody, I think it was Danny Cahill again, who talked about how when he won, he was sort of in shock and whatever, and Jillian Michaels came over and gave him a hug and says, "You just made me $1 million. Thanks." These are not the people that we should at all be positioning to push contestants to discuss all of their deep-seated issues with. Anyways, all of that said, disappointed but not surprised. I think the thing about this whole docuseries that sucks the most is that they're essentially just saying the same thing that they said back in the day, but just less loudly and like less overtly, which in a way is like kind of worse. I think it almost is like more frustrating to have people still carrying around the bias that fat people are objects who deserve to be treated with disgust and disdain unless they apologize for their fatness and promise to work on it, because if at least when we said it openly, everybody knew where they stood, right? It's frustrating to have people platform this again without making any meaningful attempt to unlearn their bias and their disgust for people who are fat, people who are plus size, folks in larger bodies, whatever. So again, in case you're new here and you don't know, hi, I'm Mickey. I'm a therapist. We talk about that among other things, right? Which is that you can be a fat person, plus size person, person in a larger body, whatever, while not having to apologize for that. It's okay to just say, oh, well, that's the way that my body looks. And so instead of chasing this outcome that has eluded me for my entire life, I'm just going to be at peace with where I'm at and seek pleasure, fun, joy, life satisfaction in the body that I have now, right? That's one of my like favorite sayings. I should put that on the wall somewhere, that I'm just going to do it fat, right? There are lots of things that I want to do, but I don't have to put that on a to-do list in the far off future for when I'm finally at my goal weight. I can just do it fat. I can just do the things that I want to do, but in a fat body instead. And for what it's worth, for all of you who are like about the health outcomes of fat people, it's also possible to be a fat person who is also healthy, who also seeks health promoting behaviors that don't include weight loss or diet or restriction. There are so many things that encompass our greater picture of health, a lot of which include our mental health, by the way, and constantly engaging in behaviors that put you at risk for eating disorders, disordered eating, general self-loathing, and the big sads don't promote your fucking mental well-being. So choosing to take that off the table entirely is sometimes actually one of the wisest decisions that you can make for your overall mental health, because it frees you from the shame and the disgust and the apology of, for rather your body to the rest of the world. And you get to just say, you know what, instead of thinking constantly about restriction, I'm going to make the effort to diversify my diet. I'm going to make the effort to eat foods that bring me joy and are also nutritionally varied. And I'm going to make the effort to move my body because it's fucking fun without having to think about how many calories I'm burning, right? I just want to dance in my living room because I enjoy it, and I don't want to have to think about what my calorie count is for today or whether I've moved enough to justify eating dessert. I just want to do it because it's fun, because it lubricates my joints, because it means that my body is going to be able to do this for longer, and because being joyful in my body makes me like it more, which makes me more likely to engage in other behaviors that promote my overall health and well-being. That's a perfectly valid and acceptable thing to do, and you don't owe anyone an apology for doing that. Like I said, there's a lot in the docuseries that sucks, and I think if you want to go watch it, you should watch it. Let me know what your thoughts are if you have watched it, but if you're looking for some kind of like scathing, life-changing take, you're not going to find it in this docuseries. So if you like the video, you can subscribe because we make content like this and a cute educational moment that you can stay for, and then you can share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I'll see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.